Back when people lived in castles, a moat around the perimeter kept the bad guys out and everyone inside safe. Historically, enterprises have also relied on a moat approach to security. The traditional way we protected the enterprise network perimeter assumes those already inside could be inherently trusted. All suspicion fell on those outside the network who wanted in. Well, that resulted in some costly data breaches. Attackers that managed to somehow sneak inside were able to move laterally throughout the network and wreak havoc. Plus, we learned that sometimes it's the insiders who are the bad guys. Then came the global COVID-19 pandemic that spurred demand for more secure remote access technologies. Changes in data center operations changed the landscape too. When the perimeter-based model was designed, an organization's resources resided in an on-premises corporate data center. Now, most enterprise resources are scattered across private data centers in multiple clouds. All of these developments led to what's called the Zero Trust approach to cybersecurity. Here, we'll look at the basics, but if you want to take a deeper dive, explore our complete collection on all things Zero Trust by clicking the link above or in the description below. So what exactly is Zero Trust? It's an approach that takes the focus off the location of users and devices relative to the perimeter, that is, whether they're inside or outside. Instead, users get access depending on their identities and roles. For instance, a senior manager in the HR department would have access to personnel records, while that access would not be available to a junior sales executive. It doesn't matter if they're at the office, at home, or anywhere else. In Zero Trust, authorization and authentication happen continuously, rather than just once at the perimeter. Zero Trust also restricts lateral movement between apps, services, and systems. This helps control threats from both insiders and outsiders. Limiting which parties have privileged access to sensitive data greatly reduces opportunities for hackers to steal it. Zero Trust lets enterprises securely and selectively connect users to applications, data, services, and systems on a one-to-one basis. It doesn't matter if the resources live on-premises or in the cloud, and it doesn't matter where users are located. Adopting a Zero Trust attitude toward security has many benefits, like better protection of sensitive data, support for compliance auditing, lowered breach risk and detection time, better visibility into network traffic, and better control in cloud environments. A Zero Trust model includes something called microsegmentation, which is a fundamental principle of cybersecurity. Microsegmentation means IT walls off network resources in separate zones, which contain potential threats and prevents them from spreading laterally throughout the enterprise. With Zero Trust microsegmentation, organizations can apply granular, role-based access policies to secure sensitive systems and data, which eliminates the risk of an access free-for-all and limits potential damage. A Zero Trust approach is excellent in theory, but often difficult to implement in practice. If your organization plans to implement a Zero Trust model, you should keep in mind some common challenges. First, adopting Zero Trust gradually is almost unavoidable. Because implicit trust is so ingrained in the traditional IT environment, it's virtually impossible to transition to a Zero Trust framework overnight. Also, beware the conflict between Zero Trust and legacy tech. Zero Trust tools may not always play nicely with legacy technology. Be prepared for technical headaches. Some tools might require architectural, hardware, and software overhauls. Third, Zero Trust is no easy answer to cybersecurity issues. That's because Zero Trust isn't a single product or technology. It's an overarching strategy that affects the entire IT environment. Like I said before, there's no simple, straight path to full adoption. Fourth, remember that access control is everything. A Zero Trust strategy hinges on identity and access control. An effective Zero Trust strategy requires near constant administrative updates to user identities, roles, and permissions. And watch out, Zero Trust can hurt productivity. Zero Trust's goal is to restrict user access as much as possible without hindering the business. But overzealous policies can block users from resources they need and hamper productivity. But don't throw up your hands in despair. You can negotiate these and other Zero Trust challenges by running trials. A great zero trust maxim is start small and scale slowly. One way to get started is to create a dedicated, cross-functional team that develops strategies and drives the zero trust implementation effort. Who do you want on this team? Ideally, it should include members with expertise in these 4 areas: applications and data security, network and infrastructure security, user and device identity, and security operations. If your team needs to fill any knowledge gaps, there are many training courses and certifications offered by organizations like Forrester, ISC Squared, SANS, and the Cloud Security Alliance. The Zero Trust framework is based on a set of principles designed to remove inherent trust and ensure security using continuous verification of users and devices. There are 5 main principles with Zero Trust. First, know the users, devices, and apps you're protecting. Second, understand what security controls you already have in place. Third, incorporate new tools and modern architecture. Fourth, apply detailed policy. And fifth, monitor and alert. Remember earlier when I said a zero trust strategy is continuous? That applies here too. Zero trust isn't a set it and forget it strategy. These 5 principles must be continually applied. And once you've finished applying each one, it's time to go back to number 1 and start the process over. In tech talks like these, we sometimes offer advice on how to buy whatever technology we're discussing. But you can't buy a single zero trust product. It's an overarching strategy involving a collection of tools, policies, and procedures that work together to build a strong security barrier. Vendor messaging around zero trust can be confusing and even downright misleading. Remember this, there's no one-size-fits-all, out-of-the-box zero trust product. That said, there are zero trust enabled products available you'll want to include in your deployment. Let's start first with a major element of zero trust. Zero Trust Network Access, or ZTNA. This is the application of zero trust concepts to an application architecture. To qualify as a ZTNA offering, it should have 3 things. It must be identity-centric, it must have default deny responses, and it must be context-aware. ZTNA is typically available in 2 options. The first is endpoint-initiated ZTNA, also known as agent-based ZTNA. This type involves deploying software agents on each network endpoint. A broker decides, based on policy, if a user or device can access a resource. If it's allowed, a gateway initiates a session to permit access. The second type is service-initiated ZTNA, which is sometimes called clientless ZTNA. This type involves using a connector appliance in an organization's private network to initiate connections to the ZTNA provider's cloud. A ZTNA controller initiates a session if the user and device meet policy requirements. Enterprises can opt for ZTNA as a service offerings or self-hosted ZTNA deployments. ZTNA as a service is popular due to its scalability and manageability. On the other hand, self-hosted ZTNA can offer organizations greater control. Let's get into the specifics of putting zero trust into place. You'll want to approach the process in phases. First, remember that zero trust is a team sport. The difference between success and hardship with zero trust is choosing the right team members and leadership. Take, for instance, the decision on who will lead the deployment. Security teams often develop and maintain the zero trust strategy. But if you're deploying zero trust across networking-specific areas, you'll want the networking team to take charge. Next, choose a zero trust implementation on-ramp. An organization generally approaches zero trust from one of 3 areas: user and device identity, applications and data, or the network. Then you'll want to assess the environment. Review the controls already in place where zero trust is being deployed. Check out the level of trust the controls provide and what gaps need filling. Now it's time to review the available technology and then launch key zero trust initiatives. Next, define operational changes. That means you should document and assess any changes to operations and modify or automate processes where necessary. Finally, it's time to implement, rinse, and repeat. As zero trust initiatives are put into place, measure their effectiveness and adjust as needed. Then, start the process all over again. Remember, Zero Trust is a journey, not a destination. You make that journey a success by running trials, starting small, and then scaling deployments. It takes a lot of planning and teamwork. When times get tough, remember that in the end, a Zero Trust security model is one of the most important initiatives a company can adopt, despite any bumps you hit along the way.